What you're about to see is one of the most touching moments ever recorded in Judge Frank Caprio's courtroom, when a fragile, 92-year-old woman arrived over a $45 parking ticket. No one anticipated the events that would unfold. As she began explaining why she had parked illegally, Judge Caprio did something unprecedented in his 35-year career. He paused the court entirely. What followed is a scene that will move anyone to tears. This case is not just about a minor violation. It is the story of a woman in the twilight of her life who broke a rule for a reason so profound that it reminded everyone in the everyone in the courtroom of what truly matters when time is short and love is all that endures. Before we share this extraordinary story, a quick note: less than 1% of viewers are subscribed. Please consider hitting that subscribe button so this story of a 92-year-old's final act of devotion reaches those who need a reminder that sometimes rules are secondary when love calls. It is a quiet Tuesday afternoon in late October. Providence Municipal Court moves through its routine docket with the calm precision typical of such proceedings. Autumn sunlight streams through the windows, casting a warm, golden glow that makes every moment feel fleeting and precious. At 2:45 p.m., the courtroom doors open. Margaret Maggie O'Connor, 92, enters, instantly capturing the attention of everyone present. She walks carefully, aided by a walker adorned with small taped photographs. Her attire is from another era, a meticulously maintained dress reflecting a generation that still valued dressing for important occasions with dignity and grace. Her white hair is impeccably styled. And though she appears frail, she carries herself with the dignity of someone who has witnessed nearly a century of American life. Yet what captures attention most isn't her age or poise, it's the look in her eyes. A blend of resolve, sadness, and a sense of purpose that suggests she has a mission she must fulfill, no matter the cost. Maggie is here because 2 weeks earlier, she received a citation for parking in a hospital loading zone for 3 hours. The fine is $45, not a large sum, but she insisted on appearing in court personally, despite her family offering to handle it for her. She told her granddaughter that she needed to speak directly to the judge. As Maggie approaches the defendant's stand with her walker, moving slowly yet determinedly, Judge Caprio immediately recognizes that this case is unlike the typical parking tickets he sees weekly. Mrs. Margaret O'Connor, the court clerk announces softly, reading from the docket. Maggie positions her walker carefully before speaking. Her voice trembles with age, yet carries the clarity and strength of someone intent on conveying something significant. Yes, Your Honor, that's me, Margaret Eleanor O'Connor. I'm 92. And I'm here about my parking ticket. Judge Caprio looks up from his paperwork, quickly realizing that this is more than a standard parking violation. He sees an elderly woman who has exerted considerable effort to attend court for reasons that extend beyond $45. Mrs. O'Connor. Judge Caprio begins, his tone measured and respectful, as he always is with elderly defendants. You're charged with parking in a hospital loading zone for 3 hours. The fine is $45, but before we go further, are you all right? Would you like a seat? We can bring you a chair. Maggie shakes her head, her determination evident even in her frailty. Thank you, Your Honor, but I'm fine standing with my walker. I want to say this properly, standing as people should when addressing a judge. Judge Caprio sets aside his paperwork, his usual signal that someone has something important to share. Mrs. O'Connor, please tell me what happened. Why were you parked in the hospital loading zone for 3 hours? Maggie takes a steadying breath, holding onto her walker. What she says next transforms a routine parking ticket into a moment that silences the entire courtroom. Your Honor, I parked there because I was visiting my husband, Thomas. We've been married for 71 years. He's in the hospital and he's dying." The courtroom falls completely silent. Even the court reporter pauses to listen as Maggie explains why she broke a parking rule while her husband of 7 decades lies in critical condition. "Your Honor, Thomas was diagnosed with end-stage heart failure 6 months ago. The doctors say he has days, maybe a week. I've been coming every day, spending as much time with him as I can before he's gone." Judge Caprio's eyes glisten with emotion as he takes in her words. "Mrs. O'Connor, why didn't you park in the regular area?" Maggie's voice trembles with the weight of her explanation. "Your Honor, I'm 92 years old. I can't walk very far anymore. The regular parking is too far from the cardiac unit where Thomas is. By the time I walk from the garage, I'm exhausted, and I have less time to spend with him." She pauses, summoning the courage to continue. "Your Honor, Thomas and I have been together since 1954. We met at a church social when I was 21 and he was 23. We got married 6 months later, and we've never spent a night apart, except when he was serving in Korea and when I was caring for our babies. And if this story hasn't already touched your heart, if you're not yet grasping why a 92-year-old woman would risk a parking ticket just to be near her dying husband of 71 years, please hit that like button." What Maggie tells Judge Caprio next about her final moments with Thomas will restore your faith in the power of lifelong love. Maggie, tears streaming down her weathered face, continues, "Your Honor, every minute I have with Thomas is precious. When I park in that loading zone, even though I know it's against the rules, it saves me 15 minutes of walking, 15 more minutes to hold his hand, to tell him I love him, to make sure he's not alone." Judge Caprio turns away briefly, visibly moved. The weight of 71 years of marriage, condensed into these last days and these fleeting minutes taken from parking rules, is almost overwhelming. "Mrs. O'Connor, does your husband know you're here today?" Maggie shakes her head, crying openly. "No, Your Honor. I didn't tell him about the parking ticket because I didn't want him to worry. He's always cared for me for 71 years. Even now, as he's dying, he asks if I'm okay, if I need anything. I couldn't let him know I got in trouble just for wanting to spend more time with him. Mrs. O'Connor, why didn't you simply pay the $45 fine and keep parking here?" Maggie's hands tremble on her walker as she responds, "Your Honor, I was afraid that if I just paid the fine, I'd get more tickets and eventually they'd tow my car or ban me from the hospital. I came here to explain in person why I did it. I wanted to ask if there's any way I can keep parking here for the few days Thomas has left." The courtroom falls silent. The sight of a 92-year-old woman asking a judge for permission to bend parking rules just to hold her dying husband's hand in his final days touches everyone present deeply. "Your Honor," Maggie says, her voice trembling, "I know rules are rules. I understand parking zones exist for a reason. But Thomas is leaving me after 71 years, and I just want every possible moment with him before he's gone." What happens next in Judge Caprio's courtroom is unprecedented in his 35-year career. He halts the proceedings entirely, and the moment that follows becomes one of the most memorable in judicial history. Judge Caprio rises from the bench and speaks calmly but firmly. "Bailiff, please adjourn court for 15 minutes. Everyone may take a short break. Mrs. O'Connor, please stay where you are. I need to make a phone call." The courtroom is silent, stunned, as Judge Caprio retreats to his chambers. Maggie stands by her walker, unsure but quietly hopeful. After 15 minutes, he returns. His eyes are red, showing he has been moved, but his expression also carries determination and a hint of joy. "Mrs. O'Connor," he begins, "I just spoke with the administrator at Rhode Island Hospital. I explained your situation, and they've agreed to help you and Thomas." Maggie looks up, cautious yet hopeful, afraid to let herself feel relief. Rhode Island Hospital is issuing you a special parking pass, Judge Caprio continues. It will allow you to park as close as possible to the cardiac unit for the entire time Thomas is admitted. No tickets, no time limits, no restrictions. Maggie's hands fly to her mouth, overwhelmed with gratitude. And that's not all, he adds. The hospital has assigned a volunteer to meet you each day and escort you directly to Thomas's room, so you won't have to walk the long corridors alone. But Judge Caprio isn't finished. Mrs. O'Connor, not only is your parking ticket dismissed completely, but this court is also establishing a special fund in your and Thomas's name. Any elderly visitor who receives a parking ticket while visiting a terminally ill spouse at any Rhode Island hospital can have it dismissed and receive the same parking accommodations. The courtroom fills with applause and tears as everyone recognizes they are witnessing something remarkable, a judge using his authority not just to enforce the law, but to honor a love that has endured for 7 decades. Maggie is crying so intensely she can barely speak. Your Honor, you would do all this for me? Judge Caprio moves around his bench and approaches Maggie, his voice heavy with emotion. Mrs. O'Connor, you and Thomas have been married for 71 years. You've built a life together that most people can only imagine. The least this city can do is ensure you can spend his final days holding his hand without worrying about parking tickets. Kneeling to her level, he speaks with deep respect. Mrs. O'Connor, how did you and Thomas build a marriage that lasted 71 years? Maggie's face lights up with love as she recalls her husband. Your Honor, Thomas and I never went to bed angry. We always said, I love you, before sleep. We held hands everywhere we went. We chose each other every single day for 71 years, even on the hard days. Especially on the hard days. Judge Caprio stands and addresses the entire courtroom, tears in his eyes. Ladies and gentlemen, you are witnessing what real love looks like after 7 decades. Mrs. O'Connor broke a parking rule not out of convenience or carelessness, but because every moment with the person she has loved for 71 years is worth more than any fine, any rule, any regulation. The most moving moment comes as Judge Caprio turns back to Maggie one last time before she leaves. Mrs. O'Connor, I have one more question. In 71 years of marriage, what is the secret? What makes love endure that long? Maggie's face brightened through her tears, and what she said next became the most quoted moment of the entire hearing. Your Honor, people ask me that all the time. They want to know the secret to 71 years. But there is no secret. There is only a decision. Every morning for 71 years, I woke up and chose Thomas. Every night, he chose me in return. On the easy days, when life felt simple and everything was going well, we chose each other. On the difficult days, when money was short, when the children were ill, or when we disagreed, we still made the same choice. The courtroom fell completely silent as Maggie went on, her voice growing steadier, strengthened by 7 decades of shared life. Your Honor, in 1954, when we married, people said we were too young. In 1965, when Thomas lost his job, people said we would not last. In 1982, when our youngest son died in a car accident, people questioned how our marriage could survive such loss. But we endured every challenge because we never stopped choosing one another. Maggie then looked directly at the young couple seated in the courtroom gallery. Marriage is not about finding someone you can live with. It is about finding someone you cannot imagine living without. Thomas and I built a life where neither of us wanted to face a single day alone. And now that he is leaving, I finally understand why we held on so tightly for 71 years. Because we knew, in some quiet way, that even 7 decades together would never feel like enough. Judge Caprio paused, wiping tears from his eyes before speaking. Mrs. O'Connor, what you have shared is not simply a marriage. It is a lesson in love that everyone in this courtroom needed to hear. As court officers gently guided Maggie toward the exit, something unusual took place. Every person in the courtroom, lawyers, defendants, staff, and visitors, rose to their feet and applauded. It was not polite or routine applause, but a full standing ovation, the kind normally reserved for true heroes. Maggie paused, puzzled by the reaction around her, and turned back toward Judge Caprio. Your Honor, why is everyone clapping? All that happened is my parking ticket was dismissed. Judge Caprio's voice projected clearly throughout the courtroom. Mrs. O'Connor, they are not applauding the dismissal of a parking ticket. They are recognizing 71 years of choosing love and honoring a woman who is willing to face embarrassment in a courtroom because 15 more minutes with her husband mattered more than anything else. What took place in the hours right after Maggie's appearance in court showed that her story had reached something deep within the human spirit. The court videographer, who had documented thousands of hearings over the years, later spoke to Judge Caprio and said he had never witnessed anything like Maggie's testimony. Judge, I've been filming cases for 20 years. I've captured intense verdicts, emotional statements, and unexpected revelations, but I have never recorded something as moving as a 92-year-old woman explaining what it truly means to choose one person every day for 71 years. By the time Maggie returned to Rhode Island Hospital, driven by a court officer who personally insisted on escorting her, the hospital staff had already learned about Judge Caprio's phone call. The parking administrator, Patricia Chun, was waiting for Maggie at the entrance, holding a specially laminated parking pass. Mrs. O'Connor, Patricia said, her eyes filled with tears, I just finished speaking with Judge Caprio. I want you to know that what you did today coming to court, simply to gain more time with your husband, has changed our entire hospital policy. We are putting the O'Connor Compassionate Parking Program into effect immediately. Maggie looked down at the parking pass in her hands. It was a simple laminated card that read, O'Connor Compassionate Pass, Unlimited Access. She began to cry once more. I only wanted more time with Thomas. I never intended to change anything. Patricia gently took Maggie's hands in hers. Mrs. O'Connor, at times the most meaningful change comes from the smallest acts of care. You showed us that hospital rules should never stand between husbands and wives who are facing a final goodbye. As Patricia personally guided Maggie toward the cardiac unit, they walked past many hospital employees who had already seen the courtroom video. Nurses offered quiet smiles, doctors acknowledged her with respectful nods, and an elderly volunteer married for 53 years paused Maggie in the hallway. Mrs. O'Connor, I just watched your court appearance on my phone. My husband suffered a heart attack last year, and I spent 3 months parking illegally because I couldn't manage the walk from the garage to his room. I received 4 tickets and paid all of them because I was afraid to challenge the fines. Thank you for having the courage I didn't. When Maggie finally arrived at Thomas's room, he was awake and waiting for her. His nurse had explained that Maggie would be later than usual because she had something important to take care of. However, Thomas had no idea about the court appearance. Maggie, Thomas said softly as she walked in, where were you? I was worried. Maggie took his hand, the same hand she had held for 71 years, and smiled through her tears. I was handling something, Thomas. I wanted to make sure I can park closer to you for as long as we still have. Thomas gently squeezed her hand with the little strength he had left. Maggie, you've been looking after me for 71 years. You've earned the right to park wherever you need. What Thomas did not know, and what Maggie chose to share with him later, was that his wife had stood in a courtroom and defended their love in front of strangers. She had spoken up for their right to spend every possible moment together, and in doing so, she created a legacy that would support hundreds of couples facing the same situation. What followed after the video was shared online sparked a movement that influenced how hospitals across the United States treat elderly spouses visiting partners at the end of life. The video spread rapidly, going viral within hours and reaching more than 3 million views in its first 24 hours. However, the impact went beyond the numbers. What truly mattered was who saw it and how they responded. Soon after the video was shared, hospitals across 12 states contacted Rhode Island Hospital to ask about adopting similar parking policies for elderly spouses. Within a week, the OK Connor Compassionate Parking Program had been implemented by more than 50 hospitals nationwide. Within a month, 2 state legislators passed laws requiring all hospitals receiving state funding to offer compassionate parking accommodations for spouses of terminally ill patients. Most importantly, the video made its way to Thomas Ochner's hospital room. A nurse played it for him on her tablet, and despite his fragile condition, Thomas became emotional as he watched his wife of 71 years stand up for their love in a courtroom. 3 days later, Judge Caprio visited Rhode Island Hospital to meet Thomas. When the judge arrived, Maggie was holding her husband's hand. "Mr. Ochner," Judge Caprio said, "your wife came to court to ask for permission to spend more time with you. She accepted possible embarrassment and admitted to breaking rules because even 71 years with you still wasn't enough. You are a fortunate man." Thomas, struggling to speak, gently squeezed Maggie's hand and whispered, "I've been fortunate for 71 years. Judge, every day with Maggie was a gift." Thomas Ochner passed away peacefully 5 days later, with Maggie by his side, holding his hand. His final words were 71 years wasn't enough, but it was beautiful. At Thomas's funeral, Judge Caprio delivered a eulogy highlighting the strength of lifelong love and the need to ensure that such love is never disrupted by bureaucracy or regulations that overlook human compassion. Thomas and Maggie O'Connor demonstrated what it truly means to choose one another every day for 71 years. Judge Caprio explained that Maggie's choice to stand before the court, openly acknowledge breaking a rule, and risk consequences for just 15 additional minutes with Thomas represents the true meaning of love. This is what love looks like after being tested across 7 decades and proven genuine. The Ochner Legacy Fund, created after the courtroom footage went viral, has since supported more than 300 elderly couples, allowing them to spend their final days together without the stress of parking citations, hospital restrictions, or financial obstacles during their last moments. And now, I want to ask you something Judge Caprio and Maggie would both encourage. In the comments, share the long marriages in your own life. Who are the couples who taught you what lifelong commitment truly looks like? Maggie and Thomas Ochner showed us that real love does not weaken with time. Instead, it grows deeper, stronger, and so meaningful that not even death can lessen its value. If this story affected you, if Maggie's dedication to Thomas and Judge Caprio's compassionate decision resonated with you, please share this video with married couples, family members, and anyone who needs a reminder that some bonds are too important to be interrupted by something as small as a parking ticket. Subscribe for more stories that highlight lifelong love, fairness, and the justice system, and the idea that certain rules exist to serve people, not separate them when love requires compassion. And remember Judge Caprio's message. Maggie did not break a parking rule out of convenience, but because every single minute with the person she loved for 71 years mattered more than any fine, rule, or regulation. Margaret O'Connor showed us that being 92 years old does not mean accepting separation from the person you chose decades ago. It means understanding that some rules carry less weight than love, and that true devotion sometimes requires risking everything, even a parking ticket, for 15 more minutes holding the hand of the person who defined your life.